So I'm going to tell you about how did we design a simple UI for great user experience in Createrria. Has anybody played Wargame here? Awesome. When I was at the Wargaming conference speech during Casual Connect, the guy from Wargaming asked who had played, I think it was more than 5 battles in World of Tanks, and there were like only 2 persons raising their hands, so that was kind of a shocker for me. I want to tell you a short story behind Createrria at the beginning, because not everybody knows what the game is about, but don't worry, it's not about, advertising Createrria. I need you to understand that, because this is a business foundation and some things we wanted to address lay under the UI design that we made on top of it. So, kids love to play, that's kind of obvious, and adults too. A lot of us play games. I believe everybody here played or play games. And if we really enjoy doing something, we usually want to dig a bit deeper at one point. Transfer from being a consumer into being a creator. Same happens with games, but if you have ever tried doing that, you have probably saw that there is like no really easy to use mobile game creation app out there. And we thought, I work in game dev industry for almost 10 years now, and I like doing that because otherwise I will be doing some business boring stuff probably. But then I thought, how do I translate that amazing feeling of creating game to everybody out there? When I was a small kid, maybe like 7 or 8 years old, I loved playing games. I loved it so much I wanted to create my own game. Back then it was ZX Spectrum. I begged my older brother to teach me programming. It took me 3 months of hard work, but then seeing my friends playing the game was ultra simple, no less. The feeling I had was amazing. I wanted kids and people to feel the same. When they create a game, I give it to their friends. So imagine how cool would it be if you could create your own game in minutes and in a way that it's fun to play and looks great. Well, actually that is possible, and I think we have proven that already with Createrria, which is a mobile game creation platform for people who wouldn't be otherwise able to create anything playable or even close to being playable. There are 3 basic foundations to the Createrria design. First, it needs to be fun to use. We don't want the word editor to be ever used by our players. Editor is a tool. This is a game. It's fun. Second, no skills required. You don't have to understand even what scripting is. There is not even a single parameter setting in the game. No single number that you have to put. And the games that you create, they need to look awesome. If you create a game, you are expecting the game looks as good as one of the games you download from the App Store itself. Why bother otherwise? So, and that's one of the biggest mistakes people make in the user-generated content apps. They assume people can create great content. That's not true at all. They cannot. We need to help them. So, let's say I want to make a game. How do I do that? Usually when I teach at universities, I start with students with this cool soft called GameMaker. It's really awesome. It helps people develop their first games. But still, look, it's one of the simplest game engines out there, and this doesn't look simple, really. If I showed this to my brother, he would say to me, like, what the hell is that? And when you look at Unity or some other great engines out there, things get even more complicated than that. Then, of course, we have this little beautiful game called Little Big Planet that was the first good attempt at letting people, normal people, create games. It's awesome, but still a bit too complicated, especially with the path controls. The casual people, they don't really control paths too well. And, making a decent single level of a platformer here took me like 3 hours, and I wouldn't call it decent, probably. We all loved Little Big Planet, but we thought we need to take it even a step further than that. Because normal people, when they see stuff like that, they simply don't get it. They cannot create a game, even tools that look simple to us, the game developers. So, how do we make it simple? we make it simple through interaction with the user, because the interaction, the user interface, is the only means of communication between your game or your product and the user. So this is the only way he can communicate with your game. And we went to the very basics of the UI, good UI designs. Those four principles: it's familiarity, simplicity, availability, and discoverability. And we're going to discuss them in a bit more detail on a case-by-case analysis today. So let's start with familiarity. This rule tells you that you should design your interface for people not to learn, but to recognize. Let them say, oh, I know what this does. I have never tried it, but I already know what this button or function will do, because I recognize it either from real life or from other games or applications I've used before. Let's have a look at a typical situation in the editing part of our game. And let's focus on those buttons in the top left corner. You probably don't have to know Createrria at all to figure out at least 2 or 3 or maybe 4 icons from here. Let's start from the right, the camera button. Probably you think that has to do something with replays recording, and you will be right. The red color beneath, it's typical color for recording. Camera shows we're recording video. We could use a typical record button, which, if you probably recognize, is the small red dot in a bigger outline, but then it wouldn't be that obvious, because you can record multiple things in a game, like sound, like gameplay, stuff like that. We wanted to make perfectly clear this records the video. The next one, this gear, probably some options, and yeah, it is some options. Then we have this button, which should be familiar to all people playing free-to-play games. Yes, it's that fucking energy. Good news, we'll be getting rid of the energy soon. It's just here as a placeholder and showing that we are a free-to-play game, but we thought of a more clever way to implementing kind of limiting players in their activity. And the last button, which is actually the most used button, it's last button, so it probably adds something. And yes, if you look back, it opens the inventory so that you can add items. We thought of different icons here of some box, but the box was connotated to gift or some whatever treasure, and it didn't work that good. Eventually we settled up at the plus sign, which was kind of a good thing. Then let's look at our enemies design and some deadly stuff. If you look at these things and you never saw them in the editor, you will recognize in game that this probably will kill you, because you recognize, even if you have not played any game before, you'll probably recognize most of those items as dangerous, because you see some sharp stuff there, and that was the idea. But then we had, you can do it in a multiple ways, of course. The typical ways in games are electricity, like fire, stuff like that. That was the simplest and easiest approach. With a small plus for us developers, we didn't have to animate. With the electricity or fire, you need to add some fancy animation to make it look good. For the enemies, we had used the same trick. There are 2 enemies here that you really cannot jump on top of, because you will get yourself killed. One is very obvious, probably this spiky ball. But then if you look closely, but you don't have to look closely, usually you understand it subconsciously. This one little guy, first of all, has this rotating rotor at the top. It is not a good idea jumping into the rotor. If somebody jumped into a helicopter, you'd probably know that. But then, to make it even more obvious, there is this little spike on top. So that's how we showed that you shouldn't really be jumping on it. The next principle, simplicity. It means to keep your user focused and to avoid any distractions. How can we do it? Well, it's complicated, because as you will see in the next rule, we still need to deliver enough functions, but this means you should deliver them in a way that doesn't get too cluttered in the interface, doesn't get in your way of creating things. Let's have a look at the example of an old concept of setting a goal of your game. What is the goal of your game? In Createrria, it can be like get to the goal, so bring player to the goal, or get some item to the goal, or kill our enemies, like in Angry Birds kind of game, or collect our collectibles in some pachinko-like game, or whatever. We thought of this simple page in the inventory. When you would add new goal, each line would be a goal, then drag and drop some items from the game, and like, for example, set a goal type of bring, I don't know, ball to the endpoint. We thought it's obvious, it's simple, but really players didn't get it. It was too complicated for our target. For me it's not, but for them it was. So we thought, how can we make it simpler than that? There wasn't much we could cut out of here. At one point we understood there is usually only one goal that you need, so probably you don't have to have a list here, just the one goal, but still it was too complicated. And then we thought, maybe our game already knows what you are up to with your game. Why don't we throw it away at all and auto-decide what your goal is? And we did just that, and guess what? It works. It wasn't that difficult. It didn't bring any significant problems. People were like, in our team, like, oh no, it will be detecting what I want to do in the game in a wrong way most of the time. No, it detects it perfectly. When you want to get a player to the goal, you throw a player into your game, you throw endpoint, and that's it. You don't set anything. The game knows you need to get to the goal. If you don't have player but some item, the game will know you need to get item to the goal, etc., etc. And this way, the game auto-detects how the game should check if the goal has been completed, and just displays to you. And I tell you what, I don't know if there is even 1% of times when the goal is not chosen in a good way. But then you can still tweak it around so it's chosen the right. The next thing is about availability. So if you remember about what we have just spoken, it was about simplicity, but then this is kind of contradiction. It needs to be simple, but then it needs to bring you the tools that you need. And what tools players need? That's the answer. Basically, you cannot really cut out everything out of the interface. I'm always the one in our company that wants to cut out every one single icon and button from the screen. It's not possible, but that's the ideal point, which I cannot unfortunately achieve. So when you look at this screen, there are already like 9 icons, 9 buttons on the top. I'm crying loud about it because I remember the time when we had only 4 icons. But then still it's not enough for the functions you need, because, for example, if you paint terrain painting in our game is a very cool thing. You just use your finger and paint it away. You still have access to some options like the brush size, like the type of the terrain at the bottom, like if we smooth out the slopes or not. That's another very cool feature, because normally to get this kind of results, you'd need to manually put the right sprites in the right positions, but we simplified it, so we just paint and it auto-smoothes, but then you need to choose between this and that mode. How do you do that? The first implementation was like 5 or 6 icons in addition on the top, but then it got really cluttered and I yelled no. And then we thought, why don't we put it somewhere when you can access it, but where it doesn't clutter the interface. So we threw it into the inventory, which already had some pages. It was just additional page in the inventory. And as you can see, you can set all the parameters here. The cool trick though is that we try to help you figure out how it works, because when you select the painting mode and you open the inventory, it auto scrolls to this page. So if you were previously adding some items and you start painting and you open the inventory, it will auto show this page. And that's kind of a good thing to have, because you don't need to manually scroll to this page. Then when you go back to editing and you open the inventory, it scrolls back to the page it was last opened. So it's a very easy and very convenient way of giving you additional options without putting them all in the front. And then we have discoverability. So discoverability is about finding features by yourself. So you can recognize things, there is not too much clutter, sometimes there is, you cannot avoid everything. But then there are some things you want your player to discover by himself without telling him too much. let's have a look at this example. There is a lot of things going here, and we cannot really cut out too much things because this is the screen that shows the games players have created. So basic stats, we need them. Title, author, we need that. Some additional options here. Like button, you need that. You cannot really cut too much. But then we didn't want to get into too much clutter. And we wanted you to be able to click on the player name and get into player profile this way. So we can check this guy by just clicking his name. When we used another button here, it was becoming a bit over the top because you had another like 10 buttons visible on the screen and it got really in your eyes. So we thought, why don't we skip that button altogether? iOS 7 does that in many places. Why don't we use something that people will recognize, like the blue color here, and maybe they will discover they can click it because we don't have a tutorial that tells you can click this. And you know what? People are discovering they can click the name because it's blue, like link on the page or whatever, they are just clicking. So basically it worked very well for us. When you got all this in place, still there is this last thing that you really need to do. It's iterate, iterate, iterate. Because once you do something and you think it's already good, usually it isn't. Because usually you need to see what your users do. We are doing a lot of A/B testing also with the user interface when we just set different groups of players to have a displays, to have the experience of getting different user interface. We're actually preparing like 2 or 3 layouts of a given window, for example, and displaying that randomly to a group of users, and then see how they work with it to see what works better for the experience. But sometimes we just need to, and that's something we can do with the business analytics of our game and track things, but sometimes you just need to sit along with your user, something that we usually forget about. We play our games, we give our games to people, but we don't watch how they play. And when they play it the wrong way, the first thing is they play it the wrong way. It's like Steve Jobs saying you are holding it the wrong way. But that's bullshit. They are playing it the good way. It means your game gets in the way they want it to be. And you need to look closely, listen carefully, and see what you can do to make it better experience for you. Let me give an example. First we had this way of interaction that in order to get an item into your game, you dragged it out of the interface. So with your finger, drag it, release the finger. But then one day we saw people are doing it like this, click, click. And it didn't work, obviously, because we didn't thought about it. And we thought, well, let's change it. So we changed it into a click, click. Guess what? Then we saw some people dragging it. Exactly. And we said, like, what the hell do we do now? But then after a couple of minutes or hours, I don't remember, somebody said, why don't we do both things? And it turned out it's perfectly possible. So now you can both click, click, or drag the item, and nobody's confused anymore. That's this kind of things you just need to observe yourself. And never say to yourself, he's doing it wrong. No, he's not doing it wrong. He's doing it his way. Then, of course, you can decide, I won't be adapting to his way. But it doesn't mean his way is wrong. And don't correct your players. Observe, sit, resist the urge to do it for him because he's doing it wrong. I know I can do. Stop! I'll do it. No, resist this. Observe, observe, observe. Keep patient, and then you'll see what goes wrong, what goes good. And that's the kind of thing you cannot do well with artificial numbers and things like BI. That's something you need to watch yourself closely. So what results did it get for us within the Createrria? We have released the game in last December, and we have almost 1 million downloads so far. But the crazy thing starts here. The people have created more than 1.5 million games. Very little, very small games, but still mini games. Over 300K published. And look at this, 20 million gameplays. So this all shows that what we did really works for them. Most of them are kids, which normally wouldn't be able to use Game Maker or anything like that. Well, some of them would, but now they can spend the same time and make a much better experiences. And if you look into the game and you watch those games, that was most surprising for us. they usually just look good. We were expecting people from, I was talking last year to people from Linden Research, the guys from Second Life and some other games, and they told us expect 90% of crap in your community. I would say there is maybe 20% of crap. The rest is perfectly okay. I wouldn't call them a genius, but it's perfectly okay. And it's not because we got some different community, it's because we get them better tools so they can make it better. If you give somebody a very easy coffee machine that has just one button, make coffee, they will do it. If you give them some Krups or Psych or experts that will tell you, give me water, give me coffee beans, the filter is stuck, something is wrong, they will probably not make a coffee. And that's the same holds true with the applications. And let's just have a real life experiment. Let me try to go into Createrria just right now to see what's there in the community. Let's see if we can connect here. Hopefully yes. I'll just go into newest section, which is just total random selection of the games that have been recently uploaded to the server. Now, when you look at the miniatures, that's the only thing I want to do right now. I won't be like playing those games right here. I would probably want to try this, and maybe this looks good, and this is kind of interesting, and from this there is not too much things that you would say they probably suck. And that holds true. If you go into these games, they really are pretty nice, and the games that we featured are really amazing experiences, only made possible because we now enable those people who normally only played games the ability to create games in a very convenient way. Because Createrria is a platform, we'll be constantly adding new features. Within the next update, there is some things coming for the players, like new visual themes, like some abilities to make underground stuff. But then we're doing also a very massive overhaul of the user interface. Now making it even more cleaner, even more flat, even more less getting into the way. And that's something we are excited to bring soon, now that we have most of the functionality in place. And basically that's it. Now let's have a question answer part. If any questions arise, I'll be more than happy to answer you guys.
Do the player create new stuff, new levels, and they gain money?
Yes, and it basically works like this. The more plays you have of your game, the more money you earn. Eventually you can really earn a lot, but only virtual money.
Yeah.
It would be not only dubious, but also illegal in some countries to let people win a real money, because it would be gambling, probably.
So you can only create, you can by the creation win everything, not win, buy everything in your game. So
it's not as easy as that, because eventually we want to make money out of it.
yeah.
So it's keeping the balance. So if you're a really good creator, yes, probably eventually with enough time you can buy everything. But if you're a good player, probably also don't want to spend that time. You don't want to, like I did, learn for 3 months. You want everything now.
No, yeah.
So you probably are going to spend some money. But to be honest, we have the monetization rather on the light side currently than on the hard side. So we are not hitting a paywall too early or in a too hard way. That will be changing, but we want to change it in a good way. So for example, we're getting rid of the energy system, and we'll be introducing more clever ways of more naturally limiting you with your actions. Like for example, with the next update, now we had unlimited lives for the player. Now you will have limited lives for your players, which is much better thing to limit you for for retrying a given level indefinitely than just having energy. And it's also better for the players because they want challenges, so they want to eventually die in the game. So everybody wins here.
How many games get released approximately each day?
it really depends on weekends and non-weekends. Sometimes when we got a day that were featured by Apple, for example, it can be even 50 games every couple of minutes. But sometimes it's much slower. And the servers have yet not seriously crashed. We had some little crashes for a minute or two, but that was it. In this area, we are probably better than Battlefield. Okay.
We don't have more questions, yes? Thank you very much.
Thank you.